Hey, how's it going, Krillbit? So, yeah, I'm gonna start desoldering a bunch of boards to fuel future builds. I think I got some Alps Blues, some Alps Whites, some Salmons, and then actually I'm gonna desolder a board for someone else that they sent me. I'm gonna get started in just a sec. Might as well move on over to my desolder station. I think that's the solder desolder station. Feel free to let me know if the audio is too loud or too quiet so I can adjust it, but levels look good from here. All right, wonder what we should start with. I'm gonna start with this K104. In fact, two of these boards are K104s. Oop, both the whites and the blues. This is the one I pulled pieces off of. It's really yellowed. That I pulled pieces off of though for the stabilizers for the salamander. It's around here somewhere. Wonder how dirty this is really gonna be. Guess we're gonna find out. It looked pretty clean the last time I messed with it. I don't know about clean, but it looked clean enough. Can't imagine anybody cleaned this thing up ever. It's kind of a bummer to pull this one apart actually, because it's quartz. So I'm definitely gonna save its keycaps and try and maybe retrobrite them. I don't know if I'll try and stream that or something one day. Doing a retrobrite stream might be kind of interesting. Maybe not a stream, but a video at least. Streaming would just be boring, right? You'd be waiting forever. Nobody would want to watch that. Just something sitting out in the sun or in the UV forever. I don't know, you know, the keycaps on these actually aren't that bad. I mean, other than the yellowing, obviously. They don't feel thick, but they're not like paper thin. They make good sound. So actually today I just had some issues like getting the stream set back up. I was going to do a TX184 rebuild. Got a bunch of Telios in it, and turns out I'm not a big fan of linear switches, so pull it apart and solder in a bunch of holy Jesus. I always wonder when you buy keyboards like this on the internet, because I bought this online. I always wonder, like, if people's stories are legit. The guy that I bought this from was like, yeah, I'm curator of some kind of a museum, and this board is just really not, like, museum quality, or we bought it with some old computer stuff. They were just selling it. It wasn't worth displaying. Like, what kind of a museum in Romania, I guess, displays old computer systems? I mean, I guess the guy didn't really need to tell me that story. Like, I was already buying the board. I don't know if anybody ever watches this and they're trying to determine how to best buy old Alps boards online, right? Like if you're on eBay, obviously not on Mech Market, because if you're on Mech Market, presumably whoever you're talking to is already kind of going to know what they've got. Maybe not, I guess. But yeah, if you're trying to buy some kind of a board on eBay, right? And you either don't know what kind of switches are in it or whatever, always the best move is really just to like contact the eBay seller. So I just bought a 5140 keyboard, and I bought a couple of them 5140s, like the whole laptop, right? One from like Italy and another one from, actually I don't know where the other guy was, but either way they both cost a fortune to ship because they're gigantic. I don't know how heavy they are. I guess I could go weigh one, but suffice it to say they're quite hefty. Well, anyway, if you're trying to buy something, it's really good to just contact that seller because they obviously don't want that part anyway. So in the case of 5140s, I just bought one recently where I actually got the guy to delist it and just sell me the keyboard itself to save on like $50 of shipping cost, because I need another 5140 chassis. Like I need a hole in the head, another hole in my head anyway. So there's that, right? A lot of times you'll see these old boards and no one's showing what switch is in there, right? Because they don't know. They're just trying to get rid of some old junk, so to them. So just actually ping them and ask, you know. Yes. Yeah, that hand thing. I agree. A number of them are. I just was contacting somebody for an, I'm trying to look for some Amber Alps, and I bought a board with Amber Alps for a good deal from somebody that was willing to pull a keycap. But I'm trying to find another one, right? Because I think there's only like 62 Amber Alps or something like that on a board. So right on that, just for the record, in case you guys aren't familiar, right? You're looking for an A2S 4100, I think. maybe amber Alps exist on something else, but I think conventional wisdom is that, generally speaking, that's the only place you're going to find them. Subject to change, of course. New information. But anyway, yeah, I was contacting another person, and I was like, hey, do you know if it has these? Is it an Apple memory expanded model? Whatever. And they're like, well, I don't think it was the expanded model because those were like way more expensive. And my understanding of it, and I could be wrong again, that the models that allow for memory expansion are the ones that have it, but they don't necessarily have more memory in them. I think it's like a card or something that gets added in. In any event, I was like, if you can just pull a keycap, we'll know for sure. And not willing to, right? So, I mean, like, who's gonna buy? I guess you might be willing to buy one, but who's gonna buy an old Apple IIc for parts that's in-op and not have any reasonable assurity that you've got something special, right? Because who's trying to fix those things? I just can't imagine that pool of people is very large. It's got to be our community mostly that's trying to buy those things up. 5140s, Apple IIcs, etc. But what are you going to do, right? You can only convince them to do what you can convince them to do. So this doesn't look too bad, actually. I mean, there's some dirt under there, and there's a little bit of, I don't want to say rust, but like this painted plate has a little bit of flaking of the paint, let's say. I mean, we'll get a better look once we pull the switches off, but they feel pretty clean, the actual switches for Blue Alps, but I don't know. It doesn't look too bad, honestly. Anyway, so wondering if I should like pull all these keycaps and stabilizers off and then just desolder them all right in a row. Nah, I'm not gonna do that. It's more fun to watch it come apart, I think, individually. And I won't feel like I'm putting all the work off till the end and just doing boring stuff up until then. So I think I'm gonna try to treat some of these boards a little differently, right? Like, I'll try and desolder some of these in a way that's destructive, mostly because I don't care about the PCB that's underneath. For most of them, because it's faster to do it that way. But I'll try and do one of the Alps boards in a way that preserves the PCB to the maximum extent, so you guys can kind of see the amount of time difference. And I don't know if you're really going to be able to pick up technique, but maybe you will, for like how you're going to treat one of these boards in order to actually attempt to preserve an old vintage board, right? And so there are some both advantages and disadvantages to doing it that way. Usually, if you're just trying to preserve the board, then there's going to be a greater time sink. So I'm not going to do that too much. But there's the other advantage to doing that, right, is obviously that you're going to save the PCB, but that you're taking care not to bend any of the switch pins, the switch legs, in a way that could break them, because that tends to happen with Alps. But yeah, the disadvantage really is just time. It just takes more time to disassemble these in a way that doesn't destroy the PCB. But I will say, at least most of these used leaded solder back in the day, so that's kind of a good thing in terms of desoldering, right? Lead-free solder, Rojas solder, is much more difficult to deal with. And the vintage boards, because they're aged, the pads are more likely to lift anyway. So the leaded solder helps, but they're also old and frail, for lack of a better way of saying it, I guess. Okay, well, that magnet's not getting it out. I guess I have a stronger magnet with me. Maybe we can get that. There we go. So, if you're trying to preserve one of these boards in order to resolder it, that's really the only reason you'd ever do this. So if you weren't harvesting, if you were gonna clean it up or whatever, like I had a Dell AT101 that I did that to, where I desoldered it, and I actually resoldered the same switches back in place, but the plate had rust on it, and so it needed to be taken apart. And actually, the keyboard was super clean to begin with, so it wasn't really... Is this one of the ones I want to preserve? Well, I'm not going to reuse the board no matter what. This, I don't think this is the one that I want to save, but it doesn't matter. I'm just going to pull these off because I don't care about this board. And even if I do, whatever. I'll fix it. So yeah, if we look at this guy, this is actually not a bad example of a board that would be easy to save. I have an Apple MO116 that I'm going to pull apart also to harvested salmons. That's probably going to be an example of a board that's extraordinarily difficult to recover. And the reasoning for that is actually these pins. So if you look, there's only like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I mean, there's only so many that have bent over legs. A lot of these have just upright legs. And so those are the switches that are going to be most likely to experience pad lift, or the locations that will. And it's because once I remove all the solder from that area, or most of the solder, there will be a little bit that's hiding under there. And so the best way to attack that, if you really, really care about the board, obviously you need a legitimate desoldering tool, first of all, to recover this without damaging, especially on Alps or boards that had bent over leads. You just do. Do not try to do it with just a simple solder sucker or wick. You will damage the board for sure. I mean, I can't imagine that with this many contacts, you're not gonna completely ruin at least a couple. And then you'll have to do trace repair, but to get it back together. But even with that tool, you need to be careful if you want to do that. There is absolutely technique to it, right? If all the pins were just straight vertical, using that gun would get it up pretty much guaranteed without damage, as long as you didn't like set the gun down and just burn the board, right? I mean, leave it on there for way too long. So yeah, so this actually isn't too bad, but there is some lift of the paint and rust underneath on the plate itself. The switches still feel pretty good, so I don't think it got a ton of dust in them. It just, some kind of water got in there or something and it caused problems. So this isn't really ever a problem, right, on modern, especially customs, because they're anodized or they're PVD coated or Cerakoted, or there's something that's very durable. That's not to say that it could never happen. It's just incredibly unlikely that it would. Were there any other screws that hold this in place? No? Okay. Usually I save case screws like this for old keyboards in like an old pill bottle type thing. Yeah. So I don't know if I'm ever going to use them again, but it's just like a habit from doing stuff with computers for a really long time, saving all the screws. It's just what I do. All right, so I don't know if I want to like try and recover the one that's really hard to recover, or if I want to try and recover this one, because recovering this one is going to be faster, and you'll probably see the same stuff, right? So I'll let my desoldering gun warm up. There are a couple other ways that you could really help that I'm not going to attack this, right? Which would be to get like a chisel tip on a regular soldering iron. So use your desoldering gun to desolder, and then the ones that were bent over, use your chisel tip to kind of lift without scraping the board, right? Because that'll lift the pad off, but just use your chisel tip while it's hot just to lift the lead up. I'm going to use the desoldering gun's hollow hole to begin with. And so first of all, if you do this, if you get one of these, right, there's a there's a tip on this that is, mine is 1.6 millimeter, and that's for Alps. And so I use my 1.6 for desoldering basically everything. I saw Nathan Kim bust his out like a few days ago on a stream, and I asked the question in his chat. I was like, hey, why don't you just leave the 1.6 millimeter tip on there? And he said that he thinks you get better suction, and maybe he does. Maybe his technique, he just does. In my experience, even on MX leads, which are narrower, so you can use like a 1.2 millimeter, I think, tip. I don't know, I have one around, but I could look. But either way, I actually find that you don't want the hole tight around the pin, the way that I do it at least. Because you want a little bit of an air gap. The sucker in that thing is really strong, so the pump, the vacuum pump. So you want a little bit of room around there for air to rush through the hole on the through hole area to get the lift of that solder. That's my experience. Your mileage may vary, apparently. I don't know. So I have like, it's funny because at my work we actually have a desoldering pump, which is silly. I don't know why my group would need one ever, pretty much. But like, I've never had an inclination to use one of those at my work for the job that I do, which is not at all electrical technician work. In the past, like right out of high school, I had a job where I did, in fact, hand solder professionally monoblock tube amplifiers, like really high-end ones, for sound, mostly for audiophiles. That's a long time ago, though. We're rewinding the clock quite a while. I don't want to date myself, but it was almost another lifetime. Anyway. Yeah, so yeah, it's not like I haven't done this thing professionally before. I have. And I mean, now I am again, right? I'm taking commissions for board builds and harvesting, whatever. I shouldn't say whatever, right? There's obviously some kind of job that I wouldn't take, but like, I'm not doing a lot of SMD mount stuff. Mostly because I don't have the tools to do it. It's not that I don't have any experience doing it, I actually do. Ooh. I do have some experience. Wow, that's weird. Yeah, so I do have some experience doing that stuff. Not a ton. I'm thinking about getting the tools to do more SMD work, because I think it just could be useful. Okay. Like a board heater and stuff like that. But weird. Anyway, yeah, I don't know if I really want to. Okay. Alrighty then. I guess I need to clean that up. So, yeah, I definitely am thinking about doing some of that work, but I think it's mostly just going to be in conjunction with full rebuilds or something like that. This is the closet of lost toys, in case anyone's wondering. Where is... Where the tool for that thing is around here. Somewhere close. I don't really need to clean out the tube anyway. I guess what I need to do is clean this out. Oh no, I'm wrong. I do in fact need to clean that out. So I didn't really realize that the Hakko 300 and the Hakko 301 were so much different. This is actually appears to be much easier to clean out than the 300. Who knew? I saw Nathan Kim clean his out, his 300, and it was totally a different experience. Than what I'm used to. Weird. Crazy. Anyway, that's not the right way to do it, by the way. I will, in fact, need to find the right tool for it in just a little bit, but it's okay. This will do. So, by the way, that actually will harm what I was trying to do, right? It won't harm the board necessarily, but it will harm my chances at successfully desoldering. That's a lot of heat that I just added to that pad. That fragile pad. Right, so adding too much heat is really a function of putting this on there for too long. Yeah, I see. Yeah, the Hakko 300 is discontinued. It is completely replaced by the 301, which is what this is. Oh, that's a loose switch. Okay, I was successful. Well, I'm getting good suction. Yeah, it looks like, honestly, there's just improvements between the 300 and the 301. The 301 just looks like they basically made the same gun with some improvements. It's basically, it looked like when you pulled back on this, it automatically shut the gun off on the 300, and then there's a silicone gasket on the front and on the back on this one, and it looked like on the 300 you just had the filter on the back, and this one has like this metal cup that catches it. I think it prevents the filter from clogging so quickly, which is obviously an advantage because that's a part that you don't have to replace all the time or as often. Which, in my opinion, is great. I like not doing a bunch of work to my tool if I don't have to. Oop. So yeah. Right, so here's a bent over one. So let me show you if you guys can see it without a bunch of glare, right? Okay. That one. Here, let me actually put it up to the camera. Right. So that right there, if we can get it to autofocus. There you go. It looks like you can kind of see it. So those pins are bent over, right? So they're tight too. You can't probably tell, but I can't move this or this with my finger, which means there's still solder holding that thing to the pad, right? So if you were to take a tool and just try and break it free, there's a chance that you would just break the solder, but with an old vintage board like this, or even a new one, honestly, depending on how well laminated that pad still is, you're likely to actually lift the pad itself. And so in order to get this off, right, I'm gonna re-hit it with the gun. I'm gonna put the tube around it, the pin, and I'm gonna let it heat the pin and melt the solder, and I'm gonna try and bend it back into place with the actual tube itself. Like I said, that isn't necessarily the best way to preserve this board. I think I could do it without damaging this board, but probably the very best way that you could do that thing, after sucking most of that solder free like this, would be to take a chisel tip, a really fine chisel tip, at an extreme incident angle to that pin, right? So almost parallel to the board, not quite obviously, and try to lift that pin without touching the chisel tip to the board at all or to the pad, letting literally the heat flow through that pin and lift it. Now Alps pins are pretty thinner than, they're thicker diameter wise, but they're actually thinner and more flexible than MX pins, so it's going to transmit that heat pretty well across that lead that's already tinned, obviously, from the heat that I just applied to it and the solder that went on there. Tinning is actually the wrong term, but there's already solder flowed to the outside surface of it, so it'll conduct that heat pretty well, and that's kind of what's going to allow you to lift that up. So I'm going to try that, right? Oh, and there it melted and bent it upright mostly. I'm going to do the other one. I'm going to let that pad cool down just a little bit as I do the other one. Yep, there we go. Okay. Okay, and go back to the original one. Right, okay, and that. So the left one is definitely free. The right one appears to be, but I'm not 100% sure. Yes, it is free. Okay. So that's free, right? So now, once I've got them all desoldered and I go to lift the board, if those pins are bent straight, which they aren't 100%, they'll lift off. Now, if they're bent over a little bit like they are, when they pull up, there's going to be friction on the board and you'll have to pull against that, and that friction could in fact start pulling on that pad, even though there's no solder attaching this one. And so that's an issue, right? It's depending on how fragile you think the board is, and some of that's going to be shown to you by experience. I would you're going to have to use your own discretion to determine whether you think that's going to harm the board or not. I don't believe in this case it will, and I don't really care about this board, so I'm not going to bother with straightening them out more than that necessarily. You can, though, take needle nose and actually try and straighten the pins more. So just FYI, I'm on setting 2, right, which says 450C. 400C, 750 degrees, which this is leaded solder on a board this old. That's going to be fine. That's actually good. I solder at around 420C, so it's quite a bit hotter. If you were doing Rojas solder, I would probably recommend the next step on here is 3, which is 450C. That's pretty hot. That's potentially gonna harm the board if you're on there for more than a couple seconds, right? So 440, I think, is the melting point of a lot of Rojas solder. So basically, you're gonna move up between 2.5 and 3 on the steps on this thing to do Rojas solder. In fact, if you're pretty confident that you can get things done quickly, 3 is actually a decent setting, especially on a modern board, which, again, Rojas solder, unleaded solder. I don't know why I'm skipping around the board. I never really desolder this way. So it's just good to know kind of decent technique as it applies to these things. But it's really all about managing, right, how you're heating that pad. So what you want to avoid is any overheat. Anytime you've got high temp on that PCB for a long period of time, could cause damage. I don't know, I hope to see more people willing to do... Ooh. Okay. You know what? I'm gonna fix that problem. I will return very, very shortly to the regularly scheduled program, but cleaning that tip is going to be important. Fairly certain. Right in here. It isn't, but I know where it is. Yeah, all right. I shall return very, very quickly. Kind of irritating when you don't know where your tool is for this job. That's okay though. Do not know where it could have gone. I'm going to do the thing that you never really do. Just gonna complete a row, complete the next row. Yeah, so this actually isn't that bad of a board in terms of bent overness. That Apple M0116, like, I would expect everything to be bent. It's pretty common on those. Or on AT101s. And like I said, these are way more difficult in terms of getting rid of that than MX bolts. And then soldering, of course, is much more straightforward. In fact, anybody who is building their own board and has their own soldering tools, as long as they generally know what they're doing and don't just like sit the iron on it, they're gonna be fine. The problem they'll run into is if they're not taking their time, is if they solder something in the wrong location and then need to desolder it and don't have the tools to do that. That's where you'll find a lot of amateur folk using solder wick. And I think that's probably fine, so long as you're not doing it very much. You're not relying on it to not harm a board all the time. Right, because it will, eventually, if you use solder wick, you will lift a pad. So I end up cleaning this thing out usually for a full-size board once at some point during that thing, i.e. emptying out the actual reservoir. Before I get to the end. It collects enough solder in that amount of time. There's a lot of heat added to that pad. Right, so if I extra cared about this, once I was done with this, I would go back through here and I would straighten all these pins before lifting the board off. I don't believe I'm going to do that in this case, mostly because, well, like I said, I don't care that much about this board. Just trying not to damage the pads beyond use so that I can show you what would be going on. Probably choosing the first board that I'm going to desolder today wasn't the right choice for that. Probably should have chosen the next one. You know, just to be well practiced. I mean, not that I'm not well practiced. I think you know what I mean, though. See, now that's the kind of thing that can damage. Now, I didn't apply so much force that it scraped through that pad, but it did lift. It did actually scratch the masking off of there a little bit, which is not great. Yeah. So I do actually have a customer's MX board to do at some point today, and I will, well, at some point this weekend, and I will absolutely find that tool before I do his so that I can clean the tube out super well. Because he wants his board back. It's junk. And I give a shit about his board a lot. Obviously. I would hope that would be obvious. I guess it's not. Yeah, I don't think anybody else is chatting right now. That hand thing. So I think that's why you're not seeing other people's chat. I mean, Krellbit said hi, Dad, at the very beginning, but other than that, that's It's okay, man. I'm a pretty new streamer, so thanks for watching. I guess, also, probably just desoldering a bunch of boards is not that glamorous of a thing to watch comparatively. So I guess the other stream that I did, which was a salamander with brown Alps. That's okay. On Monday, I believe I'm gonna stream rebuilding the TX 1800 that I have, V2 that I have. Mostly because I want to use it. I love 1800 and I can't, I just can't stand linears, I guess. I've known that for a while. I had to try. Had to try again. So yeah, it's getting warm in here. Got a couple of computers on in this room and a soldering iron right in my face. Whew. That was kind of a lot of heat. Loose. It is loose, but it's definitely been over enough that it would harm the board coming out. All right, I have thoroughly chosen a random order on this board for desoldering, apparently. What rows I'm on and stuff. That's okay though. We will be more ordered on the next one. Oof. It was light pressure, but loose, but not bent over well. So normally I do not attack by pushing into that hole, or by pushing the pin into the hole of the desolder tip first, right? Because I don't want to lift that pad, and any sideways pressure on that pin is going to put stress directly on the pad. When they're not very bent over, so if this is vertical and this is how bent over they normally are, when it's like almost vertical, I might be willing to do that and just be careful not to apply side to side pressure. Like this. This is probably just a little bit too much bent over to do it well. Yeah. So I'm curious, anybody that is watching, do you guys have any experience desoldering the boards? And do you have any preferred methodology that maybe I'm unaware of? I'm curious about it. Because I think, while it's a technical thing, and there are actually schools, I mean, I say schools, but there are training on how to properly solder and desolder, both with through hole and with surface mount. But it's also learned technique through experience, so some kind of art also. Some sort of art is involved anyway. And I think everybody has slightly different technique over time. And I'm not even, for the most part, I'm not even going to say that somebody who uses totally different than mine is wrong. Unless they're like, yeah, I just put the thing on there and push it in forever. Leave it there. Sodapult Engineer SS02. An Amazon unbranded sucker. Yeah, okay, I've used one of those before. Powered sucker. Okay. Yeah, I mean, basically anything with a vacuum seems pretty good to me. So I've done it with, obviously, this. This is a 301. I've also done it with some Pace, like professional grade. I wish I remembered a model number. I don't. A Sodapult. Yeah. I've heard it. I just haven't used one. I'm interested. I mean, I don't know. I have this, so I don't think I'm going to invest in another desoldering option unless when I go to get more SMD stuff, I just happen to find a good deal on something that includes, yeah, the eBay powered sucker does suck. I have one and I wouldn't give it to an enemy. Big wide hole. Yeah, I agree. I think that what I said earlier about the hole being a pretty big diameter, because I'm using a 1.6 and I even use that for MX. I think that there's a limit to, obviously, where that becomes a bad thing, right? to use 2 hands to reset the pump. Oh, that sucks. Yeah. But, I mean, I don't know what the price on those is. I think it's pretty attractive, right? I mean, like, there's a reason that people don't buy a lot of Paco stuff sometimes. And it's usually that they charge a lot for what they give you. See, now that sucks. Because I broke one of those pins off a little bit. Just the tip. Ha. That's a funny thing to say. Anyway. That happens with Alps. Yeah. Clogs and easiest for one-handed. Yeah. Yeah, one-handed operation so that you can use your other hand to do things like this is absolutely good. I guess if I was going to invest in anything other than SMD stuff right now, the only thing I would, and I wouldn't invest in buying one off the shelf because generally speaking, they don't, it's not that they don't exist, it's that they're super crazy expensive for really big board holding solutions. But probably that's what I would be focused on, is a better board holding solution. I don't actually mind desoldering when it's against something like this. I just, that's too extreme of an angle. I'd have to make something, and that's time, right? And time is absolutely the thing that is the most constrained resource for me in building keyboards. I mean, I guess my wallet doesn't love buying customs all the time, but time, right? I mean, I only have so much time to build them and do stuff, and I can actually offset the money part by taking customer builds, right? And so I started pretty recently taking customer commissions, right? In fact, the first couple like customer builds that I'll be streaming, well, obviously I'm doing it to stream. That's why I'm taking customer commissions, really, is to stream them. Now, the first couple that I'll do on stream should arrive pretty soon, and I think there's some pretty cool boards, by the way. So I'm really looking forward to them. So yeah, I actually just have a C922 pointed down. I have like a pole that mounts monitors, and then a mount and just an extension, like a 1/4 inch threaded extension that has this. Yeah, experiencing those boards is good. The problem for me is actually that when I've done other people's boards for money, I've like wanted some of them and then I've gone out and gotten them, and that's a slippery slope. I don't know if it's a problem, but I mean it definitely is not making money, and I don't think that most people who are doing this thing, taking commission, to build boards are probably making a ton on it. They are handling cool boards though, for sure. And if you're not the kind of person that then has to go have that cool gadget, then maybe it won't cost you money. I don't know. The builds themselves aren't going to cost you any money, for sure, for other people, but they're to like pay yourself. I think if you were trying to have a side business to make money at, or a primary business to make money at, I've heard all sorts of different estimates, but most people I think say that you should be paying yourself like, $60 an hour, which I think is pretty reasonable, and I don't think you're ever going to do that in this community, just because at that point it's pretty worth it for somebody to just go invest in the gear if they're going to have more than one custom, basically, which let's face it, right? If they're buying I don't know, if they're buying like a DK Saber or something like that, or you know, something expensive, or Salamanders or TX84s or TX1800s even, you know what I mean? Like they're, at some point it's worth it to invest at least in the soldering equipment, maybe not the desoldering. If you're gonna do a bunch of Alps, then desoldering equipment is necessary. Otherwise you're gonna be spending a fortune. So yeah. So again, I'm kind of going slow on this one, and I'm actually making mistakes that I wouldn't if I cared about saving this board, but is really just to make sure that I don't damage this board, like, which is dumb, because the next one I'm gonna fly through. Why did I desolder a through hole thing? A not switch. That was dumb. Whatever. Yeah, so anyway, I'm gonna go really fast through the ones that, the one customer board that I'm gonna desolder, just because I don't care to spend the time doing it. Yeah, see, that's a thing you would want to bend over if you were. Are we done on this row? We are. I'm not gonna. Okay, so I'm not gonna bend them back over because I don't want to take that much time to do it. Like those ones will definitely rip the pad, or definitely have a very high likelihood of doing so. That one does. That one does, and that one does, for sure. Those do. That does. Right, so you would want to go through here with a pair of needle nose and straighten them out without touching the board with the needle nose. Like that one. Oh, that's broken. So I broke two of the little pins off, which isn't that relevant. They're still flush to the board, so they'll still make electrical contact. Like that definitely has a likelihood of doing it, right? And so I'll show you like one or two real quick. But because I'm not actually trying to save the board, I haven't actually lifted any pads. That's pretty bad, getting that extra solder right there. And then that solder right there. Those are solder though, not lifted pads. So I haven't lifted the pads, right? So yeah, so this I believe is done. I'm not even gonna spend more time with it. It's done enough. So if I show you guys real quick, right, how I would do that, lift that. So they're mostly lifted, right, into position. So what you would want to do, if you wanted to straighten these, you would take a pair of needle nose and you would apply it literally to that tip without touching. And if you really cared about this board a lot, and these were all bent over, then once you do that, or as you're doing that, right, you're gonna want to jiggle this side to side a little bit and make sure that it's broken free before you even straighten it. And the reason you're doing that is because at no point do you want to pull solder and try and break the leaded solder apart, right? And so that's kind of what you would do. You would take that, you would be like, yep, that's loose, and then you would bend it across without touching the tip actually to the board. And that's what I've done in the past with Alps boards that I was going to resolder. And I have managed to lift 0 pads in those cases where I cared to do so. Now in this case, I don't care. So what I'm going to do is literally zipper this thing off, right? Just or Velcro. So this thing is done, and actually, let's examine this real quick. That still might not have actually damaged any pads. It did. So that one, so that little pin that's way bent over right there totally pulled just a little piece of that pad up. Not so bad that it wouldn't still work, but it's not perfect anymore, right? That's not damaged. It looked like it at first. A couple of these were that over here. No, didn't lift the pad. Yeah, so it only did the one. So you could do it as poorly as I just did it, which actually was pretty bad for me, and you'd still be fine. Right now, so before I go to solder these Alps Blues into anything, I will absolutely straighten all those pins. They have to be. There's no way I would solder those into a board that I care about all bent like that, or try and push them in. That'd be silly. Anyway, this is trash. It's going in the trash pile. All right, it's gross, but it's actually not that bad, right? This is as much junk as there was on this. This isn't great, but you know, whatever. So I'm gonna pop all these out now, and I'm just gonna set them off in a baggie for future cleanup. And so I don't know what that entails for these blues specifically, but I'm gonna use these in an upcoming build potentially. I'm gonna give you guys, whoever's watching at that time, the option to choose between some blues and some whites, probably, I think, for an AliExpress case that I'm gonna do. And actually, by the way, I have that case already. I've gotten it and all the parts for it, so that's an upcoming build that I'm ready for. And it's, well, now, and once I get the whites off, I guess. And I'm surprised at how good the ano on it is. Like, it's black, so it's harder to see blemishes, and I did that on purpose, but I was looking at it really closely, and it's cleaner than that salamander case, the ano on it. Absolutely. There are a couple obvious blems on the inside, but it's nice for $118 on AliExpress versus what is a salamander, you know? I don't know. A lot. The group I just ended, right? So I'm sure somebody knows. I mean, I know what mine costs, but I don't know what it costs in the group buy, because I didn't buy it in the group buy. I bought it from someone. So you're gonna want to be careful with this when you do Alps, by the way. If your thumbs aren't really calloused, which mine are fairly calloused for, well, reasons like this, you're gonna want to be careful because these pins can absolutely go right through your fingertip. So that hand thing, dude, if you want to get good enough at building to take commissions, that's absolutely doable. If you're gonna desolder stuff and take commissions that include that, then I would suggest actually getting the right tool for the job, which is the Hakko FR301, or a desoldering station that's good with a pump, but you're actually gonna spend more, honestly. A decent soldering iron can be had for like 60 bucks. I mean, I use an Extronic 3020, and there's only one annoying thing about it, which is that it turns itself off every 10 minutes, right? So you gotta turn it off and back on. I guess I could defeat that electrically if I wanted to, but I don't care that much. But yeah, so the only real downer about not having the Pro setup is that you don't have like one single unit that has your soldering iron with temp control, your desoldering gun with temp control, or desoldering / vacuum with temp control, and your and a reflow station built in. Instead, I just have to have all that separately. Also, a lot of desoldering stations have what else? They have like a foot control for the vacuum, which is kind of nice, honestly. I'm a fan of that. I have used those, and they are professionally, and they are nice. Yeah, so all the prep that I do to these switches will happen between now and when I do the build. And I'll prep the whites and the blues. So what I'm gonna do, by the way, just for anybody who's curious, is I'm gonna straighten all those pins out, and I'm going to disassemble some to see what the condition is on the inside. I'm not sure whether I'm gonna dry lube them or not. I have done dry lube to switches before. In fact, I've ultrasonic cleaned every part of the switch, including the leaves, which, by the way, that undertaking, you need to be able to test them electrically after, because, well, you're gonna find that if you do that, you need to actually dry all the internal components out appropriately. I live somewhere where it's dry most of the time, so for me that's really just blowing compressed air through every one of the segments of the SKCM switch. But boom, blues. What you gonna do? Yeah, but if you were gonna do it professionally, you want to have the right stuff. I think you owe that to everybody, right? And then get technique down. And the right way, yeah, any major desoldering you do is for personal. Yeah, but you're gonna run into experiences where you're like, ah, crap, I need to desolder that thing that I soldered because I put it in the wrong position or something like that. But yeah, decent soldering iron is definitely important if you're just gonna be doing builds, even. Like something good. Something with a decent wattage that gets hot and can stay hot. But getting good enough at it, really, for the builds is just technique. And so this, by the way, that's actually not a leaf. That is, or a wing. That is a wing. No, that's not. So, like, one or two wings broke off. I mean, there could have been some on the stuck to the plate, so I guess you don't know for sure, right? So what'll happen in this little cup is stuff will stick to the bottom of the cup itself. And you want to take a scraper of some sort. I usually take one of these plastic spudgers with a pick on the end and take the pick and break it free. And now it's all loose. And there's the bare cup. Mostly bare. There's some solder residue in there, but I'm not worried about that. Right, and so I'm actually getting close to needing a new filter, but I'm not quite there. I gotta go find the box to mine to grab that tool, which I will do later. It's actually not clogged up too much. Yeah, that's not too bad. So another thing you want to do, which I didn't do very much on that, but I do normally when I'm doing deconstruct of something that's important, is to brush that tip off really well and to reapply solder to it, right? So that the flux can hit that tip, right? It'll not only with that solder on there will transmit heat better to the solder on the board, but also it'll keep it from oxidizing that much faster when the flux touches it. Now there are ways, like this tip tinner stuff, to treat it better, where you literally take it and dip the tip in there. This is a pretty new one, and it'll clean it pretty well. But food for thought, right? So next we're gonna do, and this one I'm gonna kind of fly through and potentially damage because, well, I don't care that much. And because I don't actually want to be on here forever, taking up all your time. It's another K104. I'll let you guys see the front of it for a second. This one's much cleaner, and it's not quartz. But anyway, this one, I'm gonna pull the keycaps off. There's damage to this one keycap. This one was on eBay for a while. It has whites. I'm not gonna try and save its board at all. I'm just gonna take it apart. In fact, I should do all this first. I'm gonna save its keycaps and stuff, which seem like they're in good enough condition. Hoo. What the hell? I've never had that happen. F your solder. Oh. Good thing I don't care about this board. Ooh, what's going on here? This one's coming up too. No, it isn't. Okay. I was like, did somebody already desolder this board? That's crazy. That's gonna be a pain in the ass to get off. Oh, okay. So you need new tips. I mean, that's really what it is. Oh, no, on the cheap pump. So you're talking about on the cheap Amazon pump, you need to clean or tin every 3 switches. So that actually has to do with how it was originally treated in the first place, the tip of it. It's just a piece of junk, right? Like it was not built to seriously do that job. And for desoldering, it's not as important. It does transmit heat better if it's tinned appropriately, but if you don't care about the board that you're doing, it's not as relevant because you're not actually concerned about damaging it. So you don't care if you hurt the pad or not in those cases. There we go. Alrighty then. Oh no! So it's weird because these caps are not double shot like those other ones were. And I didn't realize they offered that many different caps on these from the factory. I don't know, it's weird. I don't know, it's kind of interesting. I actually like these K104s. They sound pretty good. These White Alps only sound okay to me, by the way. So I think I may build that alley case blues. I mean, I'll give you guys the option. Like I said I would, but I'm feeling it may get built with blues. do have some ambers coming, like I said before. Guess we'll see how that works out. Although I'm definitely not going to target that case for ambers. Hopefully the sounds aren't like killing you guys with these keycaps popping off. So these stab wires are pretty useful. Like the Alps throwback set that I meant to put on that salamander that I did, like I pulled some of these off too, and I didn't even think about it when I did it. But these are the keycaps that you need, or these are the stabilizer wires that you need for that. I was like, I'll just build one. That was dumb. Don't do that. I mean, you can, right? It's not like impossible. Bend your own wire. That O is damaged. That's weird. Like the actual die subbing got scratched off or something in a section. Ugh. Big ass enter. Come off. It's gonna be so weird. That little one is not really useful for anything. That's a weird one, by the way. Pulling that space off. Like, it felt super fragile on that other one that I did. Yeah, so like I said before, people on eBay, like we were talking, are super afraid to pull off keycaps, like you said earlier, the hand things, right? Well, it's kind of unfortunate, right? Because like in this case, I knew I was gonna get whites, but like, man, if only people would be willing to do that, I think they'd be way more likely to sell certain boards. Like the guy that I was talking to on eBay for the ambers who doesn't want to pull a keycap off. And it's like, it literally will be the difference between me buying and not buying your board. But I guess, I mean, if they don't know what they're doing, they could damage their board. They could really damage it, especially with these Alps. Right, you're seeing how much force I'm applying to get some of these keycaps up. I mean, I'm not damaging them, but they're pretty tight. Nope. You there. So you were saying before that hand thing that you need to do that clean tin every 3 switches or so. You're not saying you actually need to like re-tin with some other external method, right? You're just saying you need to like take off all the oxidized BS off of there, right? Like, and just reapply some solder, I hope. Not like you need to actually use tinning something to help chemically. Because that would kind of suck. Like that would really, really suck. It's a huge process. Sorry, guys. Undo this one screw. So this one's actually relatively clean. This would have been the board to save. Not that the other one was bad, but you know. Maybe I will save the ML116. Oh yeah, I do think maybe I will save the ML116 for another day, as not to stream forever. Or I'll do it offline. I don't know. I guess it'd be good to show that board though at some point, and how the different Alps boards were manufactured in ways where sometimes they just bend a few pins over here and there, and sometimes they bend like the entire board over. Decaps or anything, especially not that cracked shift. All right, now let's just get to this one straight away. Since I'm not saving the board, I'm just gonna do the desolder real quick. Lift this up dirty. Gotta heat back up. That's the problem with going fast, right? Like, and the Hakko FR301 actually has a fairly good heating element in it. It's pretty powerful. Oh, that's weird. Those are broken off from the factory. The tips. Next. Yeah, I don't know what's up with this board. I feel like, well, it's really clean to have been decided though, but there's a few like tips that are missing on these Alps. Like when it was put together, they came off. In my mind, that's like an indication that it was resoldered. However, this board is pretty clean in terms of like where the solder mask is applied and stuff. Sort of desoldered and resoldered. There's some oddly cold soldered joints on here. Or cold soldered looking. Which means cold soldered, probably. Whatever. I just want its white Alps. I don't care about it anyway. Not asking questions about that part. Yeah, so get that good squeak sound sometimes. I don't know if you guys actually hear that when the solder rushes through the hole. Technically, that's the next row down. Sometimes you also get a little bit of it when it gets really full. Solder collecting right there. Right, be careful about touching something like this to the actual gun nozzle surface inside. So this solder is so hot that I'm not going to throw that directly in the trash can, right? Because that's warm. Oh yeah, that sounds good. Yeah, something's up with this board in terms of how it was done. So the way I would do this if we were trying to repair this and didn't know it was up here would be to have actually melted solder down onto that pad and then sucked it all up, because there wasn't enough on there for this thing to melt and then suck it up. Yeah, so there was trace repair done here. I can see that. So yeah, somebody definitely pulled this apart. It was really badly done too. Again, don't care. Just want the Alps. Man, it's like they used lead-free solder. And I'm pretty sure they did. So the thing to do, if they use lead-free solder, by the way, is to literally turn that heat up like I said before. I'm fairly certain that's what they did. Fairly certain that's what they did. Man, whoever desoldered and resoldered this board with lead-free solder is a freaking masochist. Because that's a pain. Yeah, now that it's hotter, it's going real easy, like I'd expect. So that's totally what happened. It's a good thing I don't care about this board being recovered. I'm fairly certain this thing probably had Alps Blue or something on it. And then they desoldered them. And put in Alps Whites. Which may explain the keycap difference. I'm not familiar enough with K104s other than that other K104 that I had to know whether they actually came with different keycaps or not. But those keycaps, the exception of the big ass enter, could be from something else. Still sucking appropriately? No. Well, until I find that clearing tool. Oh, that's weird. Yep, until I find that, I'm doing. So I will absolutely find it now. That is irritating. I'll be right back, guys. I absolutely have to find that. ever find you cannot locate a tool that you really need. Grr. That's super annoying. Well, I may be done anyway. Apparently. I was planning on ending it before.
What's going on, guys? Guys. Sunday here. Welcome back.
Wow. Where on earth?
Sunday here.
That's weird. Yep, without the tool to poke the end of it and clear it, there's nothing to do.
Welcome back. Sunday here. I haven't seen wands like this in a while. Staffs that wreck face wizard zombies. Literally zombies that are wizards. It's insane.
Well, I think I'm just gonna call it. I know the tools around here, it doesn't matter because this is the last I was gonna do. But either way, I'll have these off later today, and I'll probably start again and handle the other two boards at some point this evening. And then I will, I'll definitely go live again on Monday where I'm gonna build a TX 1800 V2. And maybe if there's a bunch of people around, then I'll ask what I should do with that AliExpress case and build it up, or well, show the case or whatever, or maybe we'll build that instead of the TX 1800 V2. Maybe I'll leave that up to you guys too. Anyway, thanks for watching. Sorry that it ended with defunct. Not defunct. I mean, I just need to find the tool to clear the nozzle. But either way, I'll do that, and we'll be back sometime soon. All right, thanks, guys. Goodbye.